What's up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today I want to talk about a handful of different topics related to stimulus. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down a pretty big disaster for PPP applicants who applied through the lender Kabbage. I'm going to be talking about stimulus checks and the most recent update regarding the third stimulus check that you probably should have received by now, but if you haven't, no worries, we will talk about it. And the third thing I want to discuss is this $2 trillion stimulus package, because over the last couple of days, there has been some big shifts in the probability of this bill becoming a law. So let's get started. So let's first talk about stimulus checks. So as you guys know, there was a third stimulus check that was distributed with this most recent stimulus package that was passed last month. Now, when it comes to the disbursement of these stimulus checks, there were a lot of people who received them in a matter of days. There were even more people who received them in a matter of weeks. And there's a lot of concern for those of you who have not received them yet. Well, the good news is that as of this week, early this week, the latest batch of checks had been sent out. So if you are somebody who had not received it up until this point, I would keep an eye on your mailbox because chances are you could be receiving that in the coming days if you haven't already. This brings the total count of checks that have been sent out to 156 million checks going out to 156 million people, which is valued at $372 billion. The latest batch of checks had a processing date of last Friday, and they have a payment date of April 7th, which was yesterday, which means that you probably should have received it so far. If you haven't, then keep an eye on your mailbox, and that should be coming anytime soon. This latest batch of checks totals out to be about 24 million checks, totaling out to a total value of $33 billion. The latest batch of payments included about 24 million direct deposit payments, totaling out to $33 billion in total, and they included about 1 million paper checks that were sent out, totaling out to $3 billion total. Recipients of this latest batch of checks included people who didn't file their taxes, so non-filers, included Social Security beneficiaries, amongst others. The next batch of payments will be issued on April 14th, so if you are somebody who does not receive a payment with this latest batch, then stay tuned for April 14th, where the next batch of payments will be processed and distributed accordingly. The next thing I want to talk about is the PPP, more specifically the lender Kabbage. Now, this is a story that I am a bit sad to cover because of the fact that this time last year, Kabbage was one of the PPP lenders that I recommended quite heavily. They worked really, really well with a lot of people. I heard a lot of good feedback about them. I had worked with them personally, and they worked very well for me as well. All in all, a lot of people had had a lot of great experience with Kabbage. Now, take that with a grain of salt. I think that PPP lenders in general are all a bit of a mess, and there was a lot of issues with them regardless. But in my opinion, Kabbage was kind of one of the lesser of all evils. It was a good lender, all things considered. Well, recently, this has taken a turn for the worst. You see, Kabbage was recently acquired by American Express, and as a result, the PPP section of their business was kind of left for dead. And according to a CNBC article that was published yesterday, a lot of PPP applicants who had applied for the PPP through Kabbage have been kind of left out in the cold. And because of the fact that Amex purchased them and the PPP was kind of left in disarray with this purchase, there are a lot of people out there who need PPP funds and have nowhere to turn. The article starts off by saying that with the first draw PPP, so the PPP applicants from this time last year who turned to Kabbage for their PPP funds had a really good experience. They quoted a woman named Lindsay in this article saying that she had went with Kabbage because it was recommended to her by her accountant, and it states, to get her $7,500 PPP loan, Lindsay turned to an online lender, Kabbage, a service recommended by her accountant. Lindsay, who runs the company with her husband, Todd, said the process was smooth and easy. The article then goes on to say that since Amex had purchased Kabbage, people are going back to Kabbage for second draw PPP applications, and the process is chaotic, it is messy, it is anything but easy and smooth. The article then goes on to talk about how American Express acquired Kabbage in August. Not included in the deal was Kabbage's loan book, which had become one of the biggest in the country for distributing PPP funds. The orphaned division, now known as K Servicing, has left borrowers fresh frustrated, confused, and searching for answers as their businesses hang on by a thread. Now, the story mentioned in this article is just one of many instances of this exact same thing happening. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different accounts out there of people who turned to Kabbage for second draw PPP funds and have really been screwed over in the process. Now, they had stated in the article that the Better Business Bureau is being contacted, that Kabbage is being contacted, that everybody associated with this entire mess is being contacted by thousands of different people to kind of make this entire situation right again. Now, this is still a story that I'm doing research on. This article was published by CNBC yesterday on April 7th, and this was actually the first I had heard of this type of stuff going on with Kabbage Lender, and I wanted to address it in this video because of the fact that a year ago I was such a proponent of Kabbage. Now, I am still doing research on this. I'm still digging into the exact details of this Kabbage deal and what's going on here and what is happening with the people that are being screwed over, and I will be doing a sole video on this in the next couple of days as I gather more information and do more research. But in the meantime, I did want to address it briefly in this video because of the fact that I think it's important that you guys know to stay away from Kabbage for the PPP. If you're somebody who is in the middle of applying for the PPP funds through Kabbage, if you're stuck like one of the people mentioned in this article, then I would look at pivoting to a different lender as soon as possible. Again, I am doing research on this to figure out what are some of the best practices for those of you who may be in this situation, what you can do to fix this situation, and what you can do to go to another lender. So stay tuned for that in the coming days. So the third thing that I would like to discuss is this nearly $2 trillion stimulus package that was announced last week by President Joe Biden. Now, I'm just going to touch on the details of this before I go into what I want to actually talk about regarding this. But as you guys know, President Joe Biden announced an infrastructure bill last week. This is part one of a two-part bill, one for infrastructure like traditional roads, railways, waterways, and things like that. And the other part of the bill, the second half, is a social infrastructure bill. So things like family resources, free community college, universal pre-K, potentially reoccurring stimulus checks, and more. Now, the thing about this is the fact that these two bills are clumped up together, and this is a strategy that is being used to try to get this bill passed. But even with this strategy, this bill is going to be very, very tough to pass in the House and in the Senate because of the fact that there's going to be very little, if any, Republican support on these bills. Well, one of the options that lawmakers were throwing around was the idea of using budget reconciliation to get this bill passed, or at least portions of this bill passed. For those of you who don't know what budget reconciliation is, this is the method that was used to pass the most recent $1.9 trillion stimulus package. And basically what this means is that it can be used on very budget-specific bills to require just a simple majority vote rather than the typical threshold that's required by law. This means that a Democratic-led Senate could get a bill passed with no Republican support whatsoever. This can be a way that lawmakers can get a budget-related bill passed with just a simple majority, which means that it would be much easier to get it passed versus the regular process. But the thing is that it has been a big question of whether lawmakers can use this method of budget reconciliation to get this $2 trillion infrastructure bill passed, as well as the $2 trillion social infrastructure bill passed. There are a lot of questions that need to be asked and need to be addressed in order to answer the question of can this bill be passed through the process of budget reconciliation. And I'm not going to go over all of those in this video, but what I do want to focus on is the detail of how often you can use budget reconciliation. You see, up until this week, it was understood that you could only use budget reconciliation once per fiscal year. So lawmakers could pass a bill through budget reconciliation for the fiscal year of 2021 and the fiscal year of 2022. But recently, there has been a ruling that will help Democrats potentially get this bill passed through the process of budget reconciliation. But in the last week, there's actually been a ruling that has changed this. There has been a ruling based on the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 that would allow for this bill to potentially be passed through the process of budget reconciliation. A spokesperson for Chuck Schumer came out and said, the parliamentarian has advised that a revised budget resolution may contain budget reconciliation instructions. Now, in short and in summary, basically what this means is that it isn't out of the question for lawmakers to pass this bill through the process of budget reconciliation. When it comes to the infrastructure aspect of this bill, it is unclear exactly how much of that bill will be eligible to pass through this process. And when it comes to the social infrastructure portion of this bill, it is also unclear. But I wouldn't be surprised if lawmakers end up exploring this path and really pursuing this path because of the fact that it is very, very unlikely that either of these two bills will get a whole lot of Republican support, if any. So budget reconciliation may be their only option, and it will be interesting to see what ends up happening in the coming weeks in regards to their method of getting this bill passed. But as of this week, it does look like budget reconciliation could be a viable option. With that being said, you guys, I hope that you found this video informative. There is a lot going on in the background. Even though there isn't a ton of new headlines regarding stimulus-related content, there are a lot of wheels turning and a lot of things happening, and I think it's important to keep up with everything that's going on. That way you know what to expect in the future. With that being said, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.